All right, welcome back to my ongoing study of Revelation 16, which takes us to this part 4. And just as a side note, I did go back and amend part of what I wrote for Revelation 13. I am not going to update the Amazon book because I had so much trouble getting them to publish that in the first place, so I don't want to rock the boat there. But what I did do, Babylon is fallen. What I did do is just add in some text from what I did do is add in some text from I lost my spot. Revelation 18, just to give a little bit more clarification to this. I just forgot it was in there, so I didn't include it before. And then I also took the opportunity to add in the Old Testament reference to Babylon has fallen, both of which I discussed in one of my recent videos and realized that I needed to go back and add it. So it's just in this one little spot, which is in the Revelation 13 text. So if you want to read this on my ongoing study, it's on page 44. It starts on page 448. So basically, what was already there is just that Babylon is where the beast will establish his headquarters during the second half of Daniel's 70th week. The move from Jerusalem to Babylon is marked by the second angel, which flies through the midst of the heaven in Revelation 14, after the preaching of the everlasting gospel, and before the warning to not worship the beast's image or receive his mark. So that's Revelation 14, 6 and 7, which is the angel flying through the midst of the heaven. Verse 8 is the second angel, Babylon has fallen. And then verses 9 through, I believe, 14 is the admonition to not worship the beast's image or receive his mark, lest eternal torment begin. So then I added this part. The meaning of this angel's warning, along with Revelation 17's representation of Babylon, which is up here, is made clear in Revelation 18, verse 1. After these things I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lightened with his glory. He cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon is fallen. Babylon the Great is fallen, and has become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean, hateful bird. So that's really the greater explanation behind this angel saying Babylon is fallen, because from that point forward is when the headquarters moves, and it's a representation of what that city is. As a side note, that Babylon is fallen also refers to her inevitable destruction, which comes from Isaiah 21. So it was literally just this tiny little part here that I added, but I wanted to make sure that you guys were aware that I did that in case you had questions. So this brings us to where we're at for part 4 of the chapter 16 study, and I want to start right here. So this is after our discussion of the thief in the night. Part 3, I would recommend everyone, even if you're not interested in Revelation 16 per se, which if you're not, you won't be watching this video, so you won't hear this. But I would encourage anyone who has thoughts or questions about the thief in the night to watch that video, because or to read this, but just watch the video because it's probably easier to listen to it than to read it, unless you prefer to read it. But it's pertinent to much of what people are contextually inaccurate about now, relating to people who aren't watching for the rapture, or that they think it relates to the rapture at all, or that we can't know timing on a calendar because he's coming as a thief in the night, and just a lot of conflation and contextual inaccuracies about that. So in part 3, I went through clarification of the thief in the night, which houses itself in Revelation 16:15, where amidst trumpet 6, Jesus is saying, I'm going to gather all these people together to prepare for Armageddon, and upon them he's going to come as a thief. Not that they can't know on a calendar, clearly they're going to know when he's returning. He's specifically gathering them. So that's not what that was ever about, and that's part of the contextual inaccuracy that's flying around. So clarification is actually given in Revelation 3's study of the letter of the church in Sardis, which I pulled from, but the end-all be-all of the imagery is pulled from Revelation 16, which talks about how Jesus returns upon unbelievers. We are children of the light of the day. We are not of the night nor of darkness. Therefore, the thief in the night would never have anything to do with us. So if you have questions about that, check out part 3. So having moved on from that, we refer to the rest of vial 6 for subject matter. So now, having discussed the reference to the thief in the night, let us return to the remainder of vial 6's details for continuing discussion, and that is where we find ourselves now. Revelation 16:12. The sixth angel poured out his vial upon the great river Euphrates. The water thereof was dried up, that the way of the kings of the east might be prepared. And I saw 3 unclean spirits like frogs come out of the mouth of the dragon, and out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet. For they are the spirits of devils working miracles, which go forth unto the kings of the earth and of the whole world, to gather them to the battle of that great day of God Almighty. And then I took out verse 15 because I already discussed it. Moving on to verse 16. And he gathered them together into a place called in the Hebrew tongue Armageddon. Now we do not know for sure who the kings of the east are, because we simply are not told. However, we do know that the Euphrates River will be the easternmost edge of the promised land when the promised land is divided by lots to the tribes of Israel in the kingdom. To Abraham, it was promised that his land would extend as thus, and there are other references to this, but comes from Genesis 15:18 primarily. In the same day, the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, Unto thy seed have I given this land from the river of Egypt, means the Nile, unto the great river, the river Euphrates. So from the Nile to the Euphrates marks the eastern and western borders of the promised land in the kingdom. So pulling out or injecting the great river Euphrates is important, not only logistically, but spiritually as well. There's symbolism here. And really what it talks about is that being the easternmost dividing line between good, which is the Abrahamic covenant promised land, and evil, which is the beast, the seed of the beast kingdom, Babylon. So let's continue. Symbolically, the Euphrates is the dividing line between good and evil in the last days. Babylon is located east of the Euphrates, meaning it's outside of the Abrahamic covenanted promised land, but just. See the map below for illustration. But just outside. We'll put that in there for emphasis. But just outside. So there's a map on the next page. Now, as you can see, Babylon is located directly on the Euphrates River. In this vial 6 judgment, the river Euphrates will be dried up, so the way of the kings of the east can be made easy to travel to the meeting place of the final epic battle between good and evil. Armageddon. Who the kings of the east are precisely is not particularly relevant, even if it is speculated upon. Simply know that east is relative to the Euphrates River, and east of the Euphrates River is where they shall come from. The most important point to realize is that they will not belong to Jesus and will assemble for the purpose of trying to defeat him. So this was a map that I honestly just pulled from Wikipedia, and I wanted to underscore the importance of understanding Euphrates in the context of Babylon. Babylon is Babylon. And to underscore the simplicity of this, we pull out a map and we show it respective to the Euphrates. And we point out that the Euphrates is the easternmost boundary of the promised land. Literally, the beast will set up his seat of his kingdom immediately on the other side of the dividing line between the promised land and the not promised land on the Euphrates, the river Babylon. So the Euphrates is going to be dried up to make the travel to Armageddon easy, but look please at this to see that Babylon is literally just on the other side of the dividing line that is the Euphrates. So because you have reference directly to the Euphrates, and actually twice, because the Euphrates is mentioned in Trumpet 6, where there's 4 angels bound to the river Euphrates, who are going to be loosed for a day and an hour and a month and a year for to slay the third part of men. So clearly, there's some really bad things associated with the Euphrates. So the second reference, technically, that being the first, Trumpet 6 in Revelation 9, this being the second reference, is that it's going to be dried up so that everyone who's east of it can have easy travel to come try to defeat Jesus. But understand that Babylon is Babylon, and look at where it is on the map with respect to the Euphrates River. And hopefully if you have any questions about this that you don't anymore when you see it, and why it's relevant, and why things are said to be what they will be. Yeah, it can't really get any more visually simple than this. However, continuing on, to gather these people to the battle of the great day of God Almighty, there will be demonic spirits sent directly at the command of Satan, Apollyon, and the false prophet. However, we are told that they send these spirits to gather not just the kings of the east, but to gather the whole world. No one who chooses to participate, which will be just about everyone save the remnant of Israel, will be left out. Unfortunate, fortunate for them, whatever. Everybody gets a participation trophy. He gathered them together into a place called in the Hebrew tongue Armageddon. Now, this is interesting. This is interesting because I went through and I looked at on BibleHub.com. I just pulled this up. And for your own reference, I'm actually going to BibleHub.com Revelation. I want to show you how much these translations get it wrong. This is why I would advocate, if you are trying to study with the intent to understand what is left for us to be contextually accurate, use the King James. Just do it. It's easier. But if you're reading just to get a basic generic structure of how things are going to work, whatever. But if you're reading to study, then use the King James. This is one of those reasons why. Because it's talking about I saw unclean spirits like frogs come out of the mouth of the dragon, out of the mouth of Satan, out of the mouth of the dragon, the beast and the false prophet. They're the spirits of devils working miracles, which go forth unto the kings of the earth to gather them unto the great day of God Almighty. And then he said, and he gathered them into a place called in the Hebrew tongue Armageddon. So it seems on surface that you have conflicting, because they, the three, Satan, the beast, and the false prophet, had frogs come out of their mouth to gather. So it sounds like they did it, but then it says he gathered them. So is it they or he? Now, when you go to Revelation 16:16, instead of saying, and he gathered them into a place called in the Hebrew tongue Armageddon, you have just about all of these translations say, then they gathered the kings of the east. Like the gathering was the responsibility of Satan, the beast, and the false prophet, and if they didn't do it, then it just wouldn't happen. So, New Living, the demonic spirits gathered all the rulers to Armageddon. They assembled. Berean Literal Bible says he assembled. He gathered. Yeah, he did. The King James says he gathered. Yup. New King James even says they gathered. So you go down this list and you say most translations say they. That's inaccurate. The word to gather is written in third person singular, which is why we accept the translation of he gathered them. He is third person singular. I is first person singular. He's doing it. Singular, not they. So lest anyone think that Satan, the beast, and the false prophet are actually responsible for doing anything, please rethink that. The responsibility of gathering anyone to any place to do battle, the ultimate epic battle, is Jesus Christ himself. He is in control of the situation. It is at his behest that this vial is poured out. And so there's a facilitation of the gathering through Satan, the beast, and the false prophet. But this is telling you that ultimately the responsibility of gathering these folks is Jesus Christ's, and he is going to be responsible for bringing it about. So even though it doesn't seem on the surface that that's a big distinction, it actually is. Because you are wresting control, W-R-E-S-T-I-N-G, you're seizing control from Satan, the beast, and the false prophet, and bringing it back to the person who actually has control, who is Jesus himself. So I wanted to point that out. Some people might not care, some people might. It's interesting to me. The he that does the gathering to Armageddon is not Apollyon. It is not Satan. The false prophet is not even the one responsible. No, the he who gathered these folks is none other than Jesus himself. And this is interesting to note because vial 6 judgment makes the road to get to Armageddon simple. Satan, Apollyon, and the false prophet send the alerts out that it is time to gather. However, the path is ultimately directed by the one they shall meet to do battle against. This distinction is important to note because it stresses that Jesus is in control of all things at all times during Daniel's 70th week, lest one think otherwise. While many Bible translations render it as they, which I just showed you, the original Greek word is written in third person singular. He is accurate, not they. Now, the same principle is at play during the destruction of Babylon, which we'll discuss in Revelation 17. The beast and the 10 kings are the ones who destroy the city. They hate her and they burn her with fire. But they do so because God puts it in their hearts to do so to fulfill his will. He's in control. He uses them to bring it about, but he is still in control. Evidence of Jesus rounding up the troops is seen in Joel 3. Starting in verse 9. Proclaim ye this among the Gentiles. Prepare war, wake up the mighty men. Let all of the men of war draw near. Let them come up. Beat your plowshares into swords and your pruning hooks into spears. Let the weak say, I am strong. Assemble yourselves and come, all ye heathen, and gather yourselves together round about. Thither cause thy mighty ones to come down, O Lord. Thither cause thy mighty ones to come down, O Lord. Who's causing the mighty ones to come down? Jesus. Let the heathen be wakened, and come up to the valley of Jehoshaphat, for there will I sit to judge all the heathen round about. Put ye in the sickle, for the harvest is ripe. Come get you down, for the press is full. The fats overflow, for their wickedness is great. And then per Revelation 14, the winepress was trampled, trodden without the city, and blood came out of the winepress up to the horse's bridle by the space of 1,600 furlongs. So we're going to discuss that too. But Joel 3 is obviously the sister passage to that, which is first mentioned in Revelation in chapter 14, and then obviously again in chapter 19. So Jesus is bringing the people to him so he can destroy them once and for all. Revelation 16:17. And the 7th angel poured out his vial into the air. There came a great voice out of the temple of heaven from the throne saying, it is done. With the pouring out of vial 7 comes the conclusion of Daniel's 70th week. No, Daniel's 70th week does not technically end with the return of Jesus Christ. It ends with the pouring out of vial 7. Now, we should know this already if we're familiar with the text of the Olivet Discourse, such as is found in Matthew 24. It says, immediately after the tribulation of those days, shall the sun be darkened, the moon shall not give her light, the stars shall fall from heaven, the powers of the heaven shall be shaken, and then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. Then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn when they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. So Jesus' return does not end the 70th week. It comes after the conclusion of the 70th week, but immediately after. The technical end of the 70th week is the pouring out of vial 7. In case anyone was unclear about that, there you go. Now, this distinction is important to note for several reasons, not the least of which is that the conclusion of the 70th week via the pouring out of vial 7 marks the end of the protection of the remnant in the wilderness. They were given a very specific 1,260 days to be preserved. If Jesus were to not return immediately after the conclusion of the 70th week, they would inevitably die at the hand of those who tried to kill them the first time. Tried to kill them as they fled. Therefore, we understand there will not be unnecessary delay between the end of the 70th week and the return of Jesus Christ. However, still note that the 70th week does not end with the return of Jesus. It ends with the pouring out of vial 7. Vial 7 is the final of the 7 plagues that were given to the angels to dispense in Revelation 15. The 7 plagues and the 7 vials are synonymous terms. And we see this in Revelation 15:1 and Revelation 16:1. I saw another sign in heaven, great and marvelous, 7 angels having the 7 last plagues, for in them is filled up the wrath of God. And I heard a great voice out of the temple saying to the 7 angels, go your ways and pour out the vials of wrath of God upon the earth. So they're the same thing, called 2 different ways. We see The final plague being described in detail after the final vial is poured out. Revelation 16:18. There were voices and thunderings and lightnings, and there was a great earthquake, such as was not since men were upon the earth, so mighty an earthquake and so great. The great city was divided into 3 parts. That's Jerusalem. And the cities of the nations fell. That's Damascus. And Moab and Ammon and Tyre and Sidon and Israel and everything else that's mentioned in Amos 1 and 2 and Zephaniah 2 and 3 and Isaiah 13 through 22 and Jeremiah 46 through 51. All of them. So we're going to, this last part discussion is going to be extensive because I'm going to explain that. But I also did write a book about it. But I'm going to explain all that. The cities of the nations fall in the great earthquake, which is specifically stated to occur in conjunction with vial 7. And great Babylon came in remembrance before God to give to her the cup of the wine of the fierceness of his wrath. And every island fled away, the mountains were not found, and there fell upon men a great hail out of heaven, every stone about the weight of a talent. Men blasphemed God because of the plague of hail, for the plague thereof was exceeding great. So the rest of this is going to be talking about the pouring out of vial 7 and all the things that occur with that. Jerusalem being divided into 3 parts as a result of the earthquake, the cities of the nations falling as a result of the earthquake. If people want to know how Damascus is going to be destroyed, reference Amos 1 and 2. It tells you in a great earthquake, and that earthquake is linked to this. And then obviously Babylon, which is going to bleed into chapters 17 and 18, which is why I'm going to condense all those into kind of one study in the Amazon part of the book, but obviously we'll deal with them separately here. So there's still quite a bit to talk about with regard to these final verses, but that's what I've got so far. So if you have any questions, let me know. I did also want to let you know that I added that part into Revelation 13, just a couple brief parts to foreshadow or to further explain the Babylon as fallen that was foreshadowed in chapter 14 technically, but I discussed it in chapters 13 and 14. But yeah, if you guys have any questions, let me know. I'll update this on academia, and I'll see you later.